What's going on, guys? George Morales again, coming at you with another video. As a reminder, I'm a mortgage lender here in California, and today we're talking about, is it a good time to buy a house really around this time, end of, third to fourth quarter of 2024. You might be considering this purchase, and it's been a year, right, for a lot of people. And so this is a question that comes up super often. When you ask this question, you're either going to get a super enthusiastic yes or a super passionate no. And the yes oftentimes comes from the people that are trying to sell you a home. Unfortunately, the ones that are in the industry and obviously make money by selling you a home. And the no's come from people that just believe the market's going to crash and they're set on the market crashing. Both answers are actually, I think the answers worth listening to, in my opinion, are going to be the ones where the person actually doesn't say yes or no. They say depends. It depends on your scenario. And then they take some time to go and ask you some questions before they actually give you an answer on whether it might be a good time to buy a home. Because I'm of the belief that it's always a good time to buy, but it's a good time to buy for some, depending on your scenario. But if I had to ask this question or answer this question, I'd first want to know a few things. So here are the questions that you should ask yourself to really figure out whether it's a good time to buy a home for you, right? Because what does it matter for everyone else, but for you and your current scenario? And we'll get right into it. The first one that I would ask myself and that you should ask yourself is, do you have a steady source of income? And the reason for this is the standard mortgage is going to be a 30-year term, right? 360 months, right? That's a long time that you're going to be responsible and required to go ahead and pay on a mortgage payment and a debt. And so if your income isn't very reliable and you decide to take on a mortgage payment that you can't necessarily make on time responsibly, this can significantly impact your credit score in a negative way. One late payment, for example, on a mortgage payment can literally tank your credit score by 100 plus points. And that's being generous. That can happen on a credit card. So just imagine what happens when you decide to be 30 days late on a mortgage payment. It's not going to be a good thing for your credit report. So this is a super important question to ask yourself is, do you have a steady source of income? If your income's fluctuating up and down, if you don't know, how much you're going to make next month, or if you're even going to be able to go ahead and earn any kind of income because your hours are fluctuating, or if you make commission income and you don't know if you're going to be able to go ahead and sell, whatever product that you sell at work, and don't know where that next, check is coming from, then it might not be a good time for you to go ahead and buy, right? So it's important to have a steady source of income. Question number 2 that I would ask myself is, can you find a home with a mortgage payment within a comfortable budget? So this is important because one thing that people expect when you're buying your first home is that your mortgage payment is going to be equivalent to your rent payment, right? And so if you look at, I'm in the Bay Area myself, and if you look at rent payments for 1-2 bedroom apartments or condos or what have you, can be in the low $2,000 range, so maybe mid $2,000, maybe high, $2,000 or somewhere in that range. But a mortgage payment in the Bay Area is not anything lower than $4,000 a month, and that's still being conservative, right? That's a $500,000, starter home, quote unquote. And so when you go from renting to owning, there's typically going to be some kind of a jump there in terms of housing expense. So the question becomes is, can you actually find something that's still going to allow you to go and stay within a comfortable range and not overextending yourself, right? So this goes hand in hand with question number 1 when it comes to income. The point behind this, or the root concern here, is, are we going to be able to continually make this payment for the longer period of time? And right now rates are in the 6% range for FHA, maybe in the 5% range in some cases. Which means mortgage payments are still going to be, they're going to be relatively lower than what they've been in the last 12 months or so, but they're still going to be, higher than your rent payment. And so the jump from your rent payment to your mortgage payment may be too far of a jump, depending on what kind of home you want to buy, what area that you want to buy, what size of the property that you want to go ahead and buy. And you don't want to overextend yourself to the point where you maybe even have to take on additional jobs or work overtime, or scrap for more money to be able to go and start making those mortgage payments. And so with this, what I'd say is that understand that your first home is probably not going to be your last, right? A high percentage of homeowners end up selling, within, 8 to 12 years, right? When they buy that first home, right? They're just using that home to go ahead and get in the door to build some equity and then move into the home that they really, really like once they take that equity and apply it towards a down payment and can still get in with a comfortable mortgage payment. So you're likely going to have opportunities at a later time to go ahead and buy. And what that means is that a comfortable mortgage payment might mean considering a smaller home, or maybe a condo, or maybe a townhome, or maybe a different neighborhood that you weren't initially thinking. But this is something to go and keep in mind: is can you find a home within a comfortable mortgage payment, with current rates, with current prices? And if not, can you make a different type of property that's maybe smaller or different neighborhood work just to get in the door to home ownership, and then allow yourself to go and upgrade within a few years? The third question that I ask is, do you have any reserves or savings? And so this is super important whether you own or you rent. But the reason for that is you can lose your source of income regardless of whether you're a renter or whether you're a homeowner, and emergencies do happen. So having a few months of reserves can help you weather that storm, while you get your situation straightened out and get back on your feet if it's some kind of emergency that, for whatever reason has you down for a few months, right? So having some savings is important, and how much you have in savings is really going to be personal preference. Personal finance is personal. So you can decide to have 1, 2, 3 months of reserves, 6 months of reserves, 12 months of reserves, depending on how much time you want to go ahead and allow yourself to have if one of these emergencies or things can happen, right? If you lose your job, how long do you think it would take you to get back on your feet and find a new job that's going to be of equal or similar pay? If you think you could do that in a few months, then maybe a few months is good for you. If you think you feel more comfortable with 6 to 12 months, then make sure you have some of that saved. And if you do, then that is a good indicator that it may be a good time for you to go ahead and buy, if you can answer yes to that question, right? And so those reserves can give you peace of mind. And if something, also not only just emergencies, but if something major needs to be repaired on the home, you can get it taken care of, so you don't have to defer the maintenance on the home and still keep your current level of lifestyle. I think that's important. People forget that when you own a home, you not only have that mortgage payment, but things happen. Things can break. Your AC can break, your heating can break, and this is stuff that isn't cheap, right? If you don't have a home warranty, you now have to come out of pocket for this kind of stuff. And if you're having to dig into your income that you wouldn't have normally used for this kind of stuff, you're having to change your current level of lifestyle, right? So fourth question is, do you foresee or plan any life changes soon? So this one's important as well, because I'd ask myself, how's your career going? How's work going? Do you think you're going to be able to go ahead and maybe get a promotion soon that would cause you to have to relocate for whatever reason, right? Do you see yourself having to move in the next couple of years because of that, or maybe change jobs or different companies in a different part of the States, or maybe even a different state, right? If you have to sell soon because you have to move, whether it's for a job or any other reason, and the market has a rough couple of years, you might have to take a loss on that sale, right? So this is something that's important to go ahead and consider, is when you're buying that home, how long do you go ahead and intend to keep that home? And if you're seeing something coming up with your job or any kind of other lifestyle change or life change, then this is important to go ahead and consider, right? Because again, if you have to sell, you won't have allowed enough time for the market to go ahead and recover if it's had a couple, rough years. Next part of that is, are you building a family, right? Are you building a family? That's a major life change, right? If you're building a family, or maybe getting married, getting married or having kids is going to influence the type of property that you may want or have to buy, right? If we're thinking condos and townhomes right now, but you're planning on expanding your family, or getting married, then that condo or townhome may not be big enough at that, for that next phase of your life. And so maybe getting in the door with a condo or townhome now may not make sense, right? Maybe that means that we have to go with single family home with space, already built in, backyard, do what you have to do so that you don't have to sell and try to buy and upgrade within a few years and not necessarily be in a position to go and do so, right? Also the timeline of that, right? If you're having kids within a certain timeline, if you're getting married with a certain timeline, this is all going to influence whether it's a good time to go ahead and pull the trigger on a purchase right now, Q3 or Q4 of 2024, or decide to maybe postpone it to 2025. Number 5 is, have you shown that you can take on the responsibility of this debt, right? AKA, you're taking on a $500,000 mortgage or more, right? That's a debt that you're taking on. And again, that mortgage term is typically 30 plus years. Are you responsible enough? Do you think you're responsible enough to be able to go ahead and make those payments on time and handle that? And so the way that I would answer that, and the way that I would really figure out whether I'm ready or not with this scenario is look at my current credit situation, right? How's your credit situation right now? Not just your credit scores, because credit scores are one piece, and you can qualify for a mortgage with a terrible credit score in like the 500s, or you can also have a great credit score but have a ton of debt, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you're ready just because you have a great credit score, right? Because you could be close to being maxed out or just have a lot of revolving debt on some of these credit cards, and that's not typically a good sign. But how are you managing the debt, right? Are you maxed out on these credit cards and you're paying high rates on these credit cards to the point where it's like snowballing and it's going to be hard to be able to go and catch up and pay that down the line? Or are you able to pay them off in full monthly, right? I'm a big believer that if you're using credit cards, use them, but don't pay interest on them, right? And what that means is if you're using $500 a month on a credit card, pay that credit card off in full, pay the full balance before that next billing cycle or what have you, so that you don't have to pay any interest on that. And yes, you accumulated your points, you did your thing, you got your rewards, but didn't have to pay any interest or take on any debt, right? I believe that is the responsible way to go ahead and use something like that. So are you able to pay them off in full monthly? Are you on time with your payments, right? Not only on your credit cards, but on any other loans that you might have, whether it's car loans or what have you. It's important, right? Because if you've had recent late payments on something like that, just imagine, if you had a late payment on a mortgage, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video. Do you have any personal or like debt consolidation type loans? These type of loans are often a sign that there's some kind of financial trouble or struggle there, right? It's not good to have those, right? Because you're typically taking them out because maybe you're not earning enough income if you're taking on a personal loan, right? Or if you're taking on a debt consolidation loan, right? It means you took on too much previously and now you're taking on even more debt to pay that previous debt off. So it's a sign that, hey, you may not be quite ready to be able to go and take on that mortgage. And then lastly, question number 6 is, do you intend to keep this property long-term? This kind of lines up with number 4, which is any, life changes, coming soon. It kind of ties together, right? Real estate, again, has a track record of appreciating in value over long periods of time. And yes, you can get lucky like many people did during, right before COVID, and a couple years later, now they have a ton of equity, but it doesn't always work that way, right? And the market does ebb and flow. And so if you plan to sell that property, relatively soon, or just do it, for a flip, then you may be selling at a loss. So that's something to go ahead and consider. So, and one thing to also think about is if you want to still buy, but don't know if you plan to really stay in that property long-term, think about whether you can rent that property, instead of selling it in 2 years. So if you think in 2-3 years you want to upgrade to a different type of property, that's okay. You don't necessarily have to sell it, right? Instead of selling it, consider the option of potentially renting the home out, in 1 to 2 years, if you don't see yourself living in there for too long. And if you rent it out to buy another property, the mortgage lender is usually going to be able to go ahead and use the market rents for that property to offset that debt and allow you to qualify for that next property. So something to go ahead and think about. So 6 questions that I would ask myself to figure out whether it's a good time to buy a home. Like I said, I think it's always a good time. It's just a matter of whether it's a good time for you specifically based on your current scenario. Hope this was helpful for you guys. As a reminder, I'm a loan officer licensed in the state of California, and I do these videos to show you guys that homeownership is still possible. And I absolutely love working with first-time home buyers who are ready to be homeowners, but don't believe they quite have enough saved to be able to make that purchase happen. So if you know someone that's looking to be a homeowner, please share this video with them, and I'll see you guys around. Peace.